Good evening and welcome to this council meeting of the 17th of August 2021. I'm Councillor Gabrielle de Vietri, the Mayor of Yarra, and it's my pleasure to welcome councillors, council staff, members of the public to this online council meeting. To start off with, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of Yarra City Council the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners and the true sovereigns of the land now known as Yarra. We acknowledge their creator spirit, Bunjil, their ancestors and their elders. We acknowledge the strength and resilience of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, who have never ceded sovereignty and retain their strong connections to family, clan and country despite the impacts of European invasion. We also acknowledge the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to life in Yarra. We pay our respects to elders from all nations here tonight and to their elders past, present and future. Tonight in attendance we have the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Claudia Nguyen, Councillor Herschel Landers, Councillor Amanda Stone, Councillor Stephen Jolly, Councillor Sophie Wade, Councillor Bridget O'Brien, Councillor Edward Crosland, myself, Councillor Gabrielle de Vietri, and Councillor Anab Mohammed is currently on leave. From members of the council staff, we have the Chief Executive Officer, Vijay Vajina, Brooke Colbert, the Group Manager of Advocacy and Engagement, Ivan Gilbert, the Group Manager of the CEO's Office, Lucas Gosling, the Director of Community Wellbeing, Gracie Carabinas, the Group Manager of People and Culture, Chris Levers, the Director of City Works and Assets, Diarmid McAlery, the Director of Corporate Business and Finance, Bruce Phillips, the Director of Planning and Placemaking, Rhys Thomas, the Senior Governance Advisor, and Mel Niku, Governance Advisor. It's now the opportunity to make announcements, and I have a few announcements to make this evening. Firstly, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the turbulent and uncertain times that we are all living in. Firstly, to acknowledge the deep impact that this extended lockdown is having on each and every one of us. We all know how important these measures are to curb the spread of this virus, but after so many lockdowns, the effect on everyone's mental health, on families, on our communities, on our local organisations and local businesses cannot be understated. I hope you are coping, taking care of each other in every way that you can and reaching out if you need help. Remember, you can reach Lifeline 24 hours a day at lifeline.org.au. I also want to acknowledge members of our community who have family or friends in parts of the world that are currently experiencing conflict or disasters. The news has certainly been particularly distressing this week, and I wanted to say that our hearts go out to you. We offer support and solidarity to you in these troubling times. As Mayor of Yarra, I wish to also express Council's condolence to the family of Margaret Marcon, known by her then fellow staff and the many community members whom she assisted as Maggie. Maggie, who passed away last Friday, was a tireless worker for the City of Yarra and the former City of Collingwood before retiring in 2013 after 25 years of service. As a financial and crisis counsellor, Maggie guided thousands of vulnerable people safely through some of the most challenging times in their lives and also provided training to community organisations around financial matters. As a union shop steward, Maggie worked passionately to advance the rights of her fellow workers. And in 2013, Maggie received the Yarra Women's Honour Roll Award for her leadership and exceptional contribution to Yarra Council and the community. Maggie was loved, admired and respected by her friends and colleagues throughout the organisation. I will be writing to the family of Maggie Marcon, extending Council's sincere condolences. Councillors and Council staff, that brings us to the next item, which is declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any to declare from Council staff or councillors? No. Thank you. Confidential business reports. There will be one item of confidential business this morning, which will be considered at the conclusion of this public meeting. We now come to the confirmation of minutes, which is item 6, and unless there are any questions, comments, queries from councillors, the recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday the 3rd of August 2021 be confirmed. I'm happy to move that motion. Councillor Nguyen, Deputy Mayor, thank you for seconding it. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. We come to item 7, which is public question time, and we have 4 members of the public tonight who wish to ask a question to council. To the members of the public, I would ask you to please direct your question to me as Mayor and Chair of this meeting. I'll then seek to answer on behalf of the council, or where appropriate, direct the question to the relevant staff member. You may ask 2 questions. You do have a total of 5 minutes, although you don't have to use all that time. As this is an opportunity to ask a question of the council, please refrain from making statements, engaging in debate, or raising operational matters that have not previously been raised with council administration. So without further ado, I'll invite the first person to make a question, which is Mitchell Price. Good evening, Mitchell, and welcome.
Good evening, councillors, Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to ask another question at the meeting tonight. So my question through you, Mayor, will council commit to diversity and inclusion training for all councillors on a regular, ongoing basis? What is council doing and what has council done to ensure the safety of the LGBTIQ community in the City of Yarra?
Thank you for those questions, Mitchell. I'll answer them both one after the other, and I'll also refer to council staff to see if there is anything that they wish to add. So in response to your first question about diversity and inclusion training, absolutely, Yarra Council is committed to continually ensuring that councillors are best equipped to carry out their role in representing their community. As you I'm sure aware that in-depth and up-to-date diversity and inclusion training is a very important part of that, and I thank you for raising the matter. I'm happy to let you know that we are committed to ongoing diversity and inclusion training for all councillors. Mr. Gilbert, would you like to add anything to that particular question?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a little more detail. Thank you for the question, Mitchell. The organisation has completed cultural awareness training in the latter part of 2020. A formal sexual harassment training program is now prepared and is scheduled to be delivered to councillors in September next month. And the recent legislation on gender equity has a program requiring organisations to undertake training, and there has been some information provided, and that will be provided on an ongoing basis, and some formal training will be undertaken under the gender equity state legislation as the more details are known from the regulations. So I just wanted to add those few points. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. And I also just wanted to add, I'm assuming from the question that you asked at our last council meeting that you have a particular interest in the LGBTIQA plus aspect of diversity and inclusion training, and that's absolutely our intention to include that in our diversity training. I think it would be extremely important for councillors to receive ongoing training around those issues, up-to-date contemporary training from an organisation like Transgender Victoria. That's absolutely something that councillors can and will undertake. So thank you for that aspect of the question. In terms of the second question, Yarra Council has a very strong commitment to supporting our LGBTIQA plus community. We recognise the unique and valuable contribution that the community plays in the vibrancy of our area of Yarra, as well as the fundamental rights that LGBTIQA plus people have to be safe and empowered and supported. This was recognised recently when Council unanimously passed its very first LGBTIQ plus strategy in December last year. The strategy sets out clear priorities to welcome, engage and include the LGBTIQ plus community. It recognises the need to have fulfilled human rights, be empowered, have equitable access to services and programs, and to be able to fully and freely participate in day-to-day life. It was developed in consultation and partnership with the LGBTIQ plus community, and it includes a series of key priorities, 3, welcoming and celebrating diversity, specifically addressing the need to recognise and celebrate Yarra's LGBTIQ plus community and raise awareness around issues affecting LGBTIQ plus people. The second priority focuses on what we can do as an organisation to be more inclusive and reflective of an appropriate organisational culture. And then the third priority is about providing opportunities for people to join and connect with each other, as well as supporting and nurturing Yarra's LGBTIQ plus spaces. If you're interested in receiving a copy of our strategy, then it's available on our website to download a copy. And if other members of the public who are listening are interested and support is needed to access this, then officers would be happy to reach out if that's required. One of the very first actions of the LGBTIQ plus strategy was to establish our advisory committee, which is now called the Rainbow Advisory Committee, and that provides council with a mechanism to represent the diverse sectors of the LGBTIQ plus community, and for them to provide advice and support and information on issues that affect the LGBTIQ plus community. The very first meeting was held a month and a bit ago with 2 councillors, myself and Councillor Edward Crosland as the councillor representatives, and diverse members of diverse group of newly elected members of the Rainbow Advisory Committee. And the next one will be held very shortly. Finally, to recognise the importance of the LGBTIQ plus community, Council has recently committed to the recruitment of a role whose primary responsibility will be to support the LGBTIQ plus community via this advisory committee and facilitate better inclusion of important issues across the organisation. Mr. Gosling, do you have
opportunity, sorry, Mayor, for a follow-up question?
Go ahead.
In light of all of that great news, and thank you for the update of some of the work that the council's done. In light of the most recent events that council has been exposed to, I think it is appropriate that the upcoming sexual harassment training that your office referred to perhaps includes a strong focus on the need for diversity and inclusion training to be made a priority of this council. As a member of the LGBTIQ plus community here in Yarra, as someone that you and your committee says the charter is to feel safe, the actions of one member of this council has made people like me feel unsafe in my own community. So I would like to know whether tonight council will commit to having all of you sitting here in front of us tonight go through diversity and inclusion training as a matter of importance.
Absolutely, and I believe I have acknowledged that part of your question and made that commitment to diversity and inclusion training. I'd also like to,
when will that be?
To let it, as it will be implemented in the immediate future. I can't commit to a date right now, but I can assure you it will be implemented in the immediate future, and that it is a shared priority, a priority that we share with you to implement that training. I also just want to acknowledge again that the reports of the allegations that you referred to have been distressing and upsetting for many in the community, including the LGBTIQA plus community, and members of the Muslim and African community, and Councillor Mohammed herself. And I do want to take the opportunity to underline that the version of events as reported in the media are under dispute. The contradictory statements are resolved via the justice process, and until then, Councillor Mohammed is entitled to the presumption of innocence. I do want to point to the fact that a young woman of colour was violently assaulted that night, and her injuries make that fact indisputable. Verbal and physical violence are unacceptable in all circumstances, and I want to assure members of all our diverse communities, including people of colour and LGBTIQA plus people, that we will always stand against violence and discrimination in all its forms. Despite one version of events being circulated widely, the appropriate avenue to defend those claims is in the court of law and not in the council chamber or in the media. And for that reason, it isn't appropriate for me to comment any further, or indeed for Councillor Mohammed to make any further statements with regard to the incident. But I do believe I have addressed your questions around what Yarra Council's commitment is to the LGBTIQA plus community.
I did see Councillor O'Brien's hand up before. I was wondering whether she might have something to contribute.
Thank you. As this is an opportunity for questions to the council, it's not an opportunity for debate. So thank you for your questions tonight, Mitchell. And I'll move on to our next member of the public. Our next question comes from Alex Redlich. Good evening, Alex. Are you with us tonight?
Hello.
Hello.
Yep. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Firstly, thank you for giving me the chance to address you. I wanted to ask whether the council thought the idea of installing a basketball court in Fairfield Park was worth pursuing. The Fairfield Park lacks in facilities for younger people. Over 12,000 people live in the Fairfield Clifton Hill area, and there are only 2 public outdoor quarter-and-half basketball courts. Neither of these courts are within easy walking distance of my house, and often when I get there, I find they're occupied. Secondly, after COVID, opportunities for social interaction and exercise will be more important than ever. A basketball court in Fairfield Park would greatly assist this. Basketball is the second most popular team sport in the world, and since the Fairfield Park lacks in facilities for younger people and children, a basketball court would make a great addition to the park. Please consider this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alex, for taking the time to join us tonight and for asking a question. It's always such a pleasure to hear from younger people in our community and to hear about what you're passionate about and to get your feedback. So thank you, firstly, for just turning up and asking a question. That's fantastic. I think you've also made us aware of an issue that I personally am not the best person to answer that question, so I will refer to our Manager of City Works and Assets, Chris Levers, who will be able to address your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Alex, for the question. Great to see you participating in the council meeting, and you've provided some really great stats to support your question as well, and really good that you're looking to get active because we need more people to be more active always. I had seen your question, and I'm not sure if you've seen our website. You maybe have, because you had noted that there's a couple of basketball courts near your area, and I don't have your exact address, but our website does list the 7 council-provided public basketball courts, and they're in Burnley Park, Curtin Square, Edinburgh Gardens, Garnes Reserve, Hall Reserve, McConchie Reserve, and Park Street Reserve. I think probably Hall Reserve and Park Street are probably the most local to you. But to your question about building more, I appreciate there's more, there's a desire for some more courts. It is just a difficult thing with open space being used by so many people for so many different uses. So it is a challenge to find a suitable location, get money and then construct new courts, and that'd be something that the council would have to consider and probably would go through a community consultation process. The other thing I just thought I might mention is schools often have sports infrastructure, including basketball courts, and I know that they're not always available to the public, but sometimes they are. So I wonder whether, in the meantime, you might be able to check in your local area to see whether there's any schools that might provide that opportunity. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Levers, and thank you, Alex, for your question. And it certainly is something that you've brought to the councillor's attention. Councillor Jolly, did you have something to follow up?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Levers, for your response. And just a question to Aaron. Thanks for your email earlier in this week on this matter. And I echo what the Mayor said. It's just fantastic. And Chris said, Mr. Levers said, it's great to have you here tonight. it might be useful moving on if you and your friends and your family could maybe identify what you think could be good places for extra basketball hoops, and then maybe email us, send in a second email, just saying this is where I think, because you've heard what Mr. Levers has said, you might have, some good suggestions, and then if we think that's a good idea, especially if you can get a bit of maybe a petition or some of your mates to sign a petition, we can then look at it, especially in next year's budget. So Mr. Levers says there's quite a few, and he's right, but you might see the need for more, and if that's the case, maybe point out where you think they could be, and then send in a second email and we can take it from there. But I echo what the Mayor said. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thanks, Councillor.
Sorry, I was just referring to my area.
And
To your area in Fairfield Park.
Alex, I would also add to Councillor Jolly's comments that if you could include a netball court as part of your basketball court and do the gender equity stuff, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you so much, councillors. And I believe Mr. Levers has a final thing to add.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is slightly off topic, but I didn't expect the comments about netball. There is actually a netball complex in being planned and actually almost finished in Fairfield Park. So Fairlea Reserve. So that'll be open for use in 2022. So I suspect that may not meet all of the demand, but that'll be a regional netball facility in that precinct. So I think if Alex is going to do some homework, it might be good to focus on basketball as opposed to netball, because I think that'll be well served.
Thanks, Mr. Levers, and thanks again, Alex, for joining us tonight. Our next question comes from Gillian Bowen. Gillian, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to ask my questions. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to do so with a wholehearted, constructive approach, even though the topic may be a little bit uncomfortable. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. I would like to seek some clarification around the Councillor Code of Conduct, particularly how it's enforced and what sort of independent measures there are in place to protect the integrity of that process, acknowledging that it's a relatively new code of conduct as well. So I'm approaching this very constructively. I have to give some context to that. I am approaching this both on the basis of my own experience and also the 20th of July council meeting. And I assure you I'm not going to dredge up the specifics again. I think we've done that enough times. But I do want to talk about a quote from that, which was about 4 men getting stuck into the morality of a young woman. And if that was a different person in a different suburb, that they would not have attracted the same amount of attention. I was concerned by that comment, and I think a few other people have been concerned, particularly the 4 men, 2 councillors and 2 members of the public. The implication was sexism and racism, and I acknowledge that's an implication, but I think it's something that we should talk about because 2 of those people didn't have a right of reply. Now, to my knowledge, at least 1 of those men complained about this, and that was never escalated beyond step 1 of a 4-step grievance revolution process.
Thank you.
Okay. My own experience making a complaint had a similar outcome and never received a response. So I would like to acknowledge that things get said in the heat of the moment, but I would like to say that the Councillor Code of Conduct should be a fallback for that situation, and it is about the people getting to the bottom and finding mutual ground on moving forward. I am concerned that it's not being enforced, and I would like to understand how we protect that integrity. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you answering my question.
Thank you for your question, Gillian. Given that your question relates to procedural implementation of the Councillor Code of Conduct, I'm going to rely on the expertise of our head of the CEO's office, Ivan Gilbert. Mr. Gilbert, are you able to address Gillian's question?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Gillian. From what you've just said, you're aware that the Code of Conduct has 4 steps in it, I take it. Yes. And I guess from what you've said, I'm assuming that you've considered that only step 1 has been dealt with. So if, well, you probably know what I'm going to tell you. So to proceed on with the further steps, that would require the parties to not accept whatever the discussion was at the first step, and then it would move on. So the second step would be to refer the matter to a full meeting of councillors, meeting in confidential session, to consider the matter, and putting it in simple terms, if that didn't achieve an outcome satisfactory to the parties, it will then go on to an independent arbiter to try and achieve some sort of an acceptable outcome by each of the parties involved. So they're the 3 main steps. It wouldn't be a situation of going on to step 4. That's really for something that's realming on the areas of illegality and whatever, because that would be referred to the Ombudsman IBAC or something like that. So it would be more dealt with in step 1, 2 or 3, I believe.
Could I just also add that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gilbert, but Code of Conduct procedures are internal procedures. They can be triggered by an external event or an external complaint, but it's entirely inappropriate that the steps that are being taken internally to respond to councillors' conduct be broadcast in a public way, and that they are certainly processes that that unfold over a lengthy period of time. It's not something that is resolved rapidly or easily.
That's probably quite true through you, Mayor. And I do note that step 2, as I specifically said, it would be conducted by a council meeting in confidential session. And indeed, if it goes on to step 3, that would be an independent arbiter reporting back to a council in confidential session. So there are high degrees of confidentiality in the process in an endeavour to reach an agreement by the parties without necessarily having community input to perhaps blur situations. So it's structured to address the specific element of the complaint between the offended party or parties, I should say. I hope I've answered that correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Gillian, I note that you have a second question.
I do. I'm not sure we got to where I meant that to go with the first question, but I appreciate you addressing it. I'm going to keep my second question brief, and I think it's something we're all finding quite disturbing from the weekend. I did want to raise that I'm sure we're all aware of the pub crawl that occurred in Richmond that escalated to the point that it is a contributing factor to the restrictions. As many of you would know, it was first touted on Friday night, it went on Saturday, and it continued through Sunday. And we had people in our Richmond streets drinking alcohol, minimal social distancing and no masks. Now, I know this was covered by the Premier in his presser. It was all over social media. And at the very minimum, as a learning exercise, I did want to ask what steps Yarra City Council took during that incident. Obviously, we have those local laws that were referenced only just recently that are still in place that prohibit drinking in public places. So I appreciate the police had a very important part to play, but I would like to understand whether Yarra stepped in to enforce those laws as well.
Thank you for that question. I'll direct that one to our Director of Corporate Business and Finance, Diarmaid McAlery.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Gillian, for the question. And I acknowledge it has been obviously a high-profile situation. It was the Walk, Talk and Sip event, I think it was labelled. I gave a reasonably extensive answer, but I'll start off by saying that the vast majority of enforcement-related matters for both COVID and alcohol-related matters are managed by the Victoria Police. We were in discussions with the police throughout the weekend and indeed following the weekend, and I'll come to that in a minute as to what's happening now. and there was lots of collegiate work. We did have local laws officers out. We don't have the primary responsibility or authority to enforce COVID regulations, but of course, that doesn't mean Yarra officers don't try and pitch in where they can, as they did. I think a few things I'd like to acknowledge about this event. One, not all venues necessarily were aware of the event or were participative in it. It was a community-led event to a degree. So I think there's lots of learnings for everyone, and the Premier's, made that very clear, and we've made it clear in Yarra to local businesses too today, which I'll talk to in a minute. But it didn't just happen in Richmond. It was throughout other parts of Yarra and indeed other parts of Melbourne, particularly the inner and active suburbs. And I think the Premier's response and some of the changes that have come in have not just been in response to this. They've been in relation to people congregating in parks and well-meaning, well-intentioned family gatherings, etc., but not actually what's allowed under the current COVID protocols. So I can say that the Yarra Police were very involved in trying to move people along. It's the congregation that was happening that was the major part of the problem. Feedback from them is that the venues were, generally speaking, in the main, most of them were very receptive and appreciative of the issues going on, and were trying to help move people on. And by Sunday, there were further markings out on the footpaths and all that to encourage people to space out accordingly. The liquor licensing itself, in terms of sale of alcohol, is managed by the VCGLR, the Victorian Commission for Gambling Liquor Regulation, if I think I've got that right. So the police are following up with them if there were any breaches from any venues. I'm not personally aware of any, and I think it's too early to say, and I don't want to suggest that there have been any breaches. All I would say is that, as the Premier, I think, has said, those things are being investigated by the usual manner. I would say the whole event involved not just venues, but also involved the community, and I think there's a whole education piece there too. So we have just today sent a note out to over 2,000 businesses in Yarra, just as a reminder of our COVID responsibilities, and that's not just about alcohol but it's about things that happen on the footpath and in trying to encourage people not to congregate, etc. Our Yarra businesses are doing it tough, as we know, especially our hospitality businesses, but they do have a role to play to try and protect the community from COVID as much as possible. And I would say, if I can venture an opinion, that on the whole and on the balance, they've done a really good job in really trying circumstances at doing that and trying to support the community through these times. Nonetheless, we've emailed out to them. There'll be further communications during the week. Lots of, social media, etc. And again, some of it's targeted at businesses, but a lot of it is targeted at the community. I think it's very clear to everybody that we all have a big role to play to try and defeat this virus and get back to some sort of normality. So I'm sorry that's maybe an expansive answer, but I hope that helps answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. McAleary. Councillor Landers, did you have something to add to that?
Yes, I would. I'd like to echo those words of Mr. McAleary. Thank you for your questions, both of your questions. They were good questions. And in response to the first question, perhaps a timely reminder to ourselves as councillors to show deference when members of the public make submissions. They do so in good faith, and we as councillors have a responsibility to respect that. And I'd like to make that point. In terms of the second question, I'd like to just sort of add that the Bridge Road Main Street, under the leadership of Jackson Wade, are employing 2 marshals, COVID marshals, this weekend to help both the public and the traders sort of understand the ground rules, if you like, for what is reasonable and acceptable, and help people sort of, in a positive way, understand a better arrangement on the street so that everybody can stay safe and enjoy the streets at the same time. So that's something that I commend, and I hope if any of the press are listening, maybe they can get their cameras down and have a look at the marshals in action and show Bridge Road in a positive way, that we're all doing the right thing. So I just wanted to sort of make those 2 comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Landers. Thank you for your questions tonight, Gillian, and thank you for joining us at this council meeting. Our next question comes from Diana Courtney. Diana, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, fellow councillors, for your time. My question is in relation to Council's commitment to ensuring pedestrian safety. I'll try and keep it brief, but I do need to give some context. I've been reviewing City of Yarra's many policies and plans and strategies, and there is a safe travel strategy, the aim of which is to help Council focus in on manage the impact of all transport modes on the health, safety and wellbeing of Yarra residents and visitors. The strategy outlines ways Council and key partners will work together to improve safety for road users, especially pedestrians and cyclists, as well as vulnerable community members, which include young families, school children, older people and people with disability. Despite having a number of policies and plans and strategies in place to promote safe travel and pedestrian safety, these are of no value if they don't actually translate into action. That is, how well are these being implemented? One recent example is the LMP3 study. Interestingly, the key concerns identified by the community as part of the consultation process were traffic volumes, rat-running trucks and pedestrian safety and cyclist safety. Logic would tell you that the reducing traffic and truck volumes on local residential streets would have an immediate net benefit for the safety of pedestrians and cyclists. However, in the final LMP3 plans, council officers did not recommend installing any traffic measures that would reduce traffic volume or calm traffic. Council officers did, however, make recommendations for measures for pedestrians and cyclist safety, including priority bike path and pedestrian crossings. As you would be aware, the measures to improve cyclist safety have been prioritised and installed. For example, the priority crossing at the Capital City Trail and the additional of the multi-directional bike path as on the Park Street, which wasn't part of the LMP3, and these are to be commended. Unfortunately, the promised zebra pedestrian crossings to be located at roundabouts in the local area have not been prioritised. Some of these have been installed. However, the two to be located at the busiest intersections, Scotchmere Street and Brunswick Street North and Reed Street and Ray Street, are still outstanding. The Scotchmere Street and Brunswick Street North crossing has received funding and is proposed to be installed in this financial year. However, the Ray Street and Reed Street pedestrian crossing is still awaiting funding. It should be noted that this crossing is at an intersection that's located less than 50 metres from the local kindergarten and less than 400 metres from the local primary school in an extremely busy intersection. Both roundabouts are travel routes pedestrians, including vulnerable members of the community. With further to the design of the pedestrian crossing to be located at these busy intersections, they are simply proposed to be the basic line markings and signage. They're not raised and do not have a road hump in front of them to slow traffic. Interesting, council officers have advised residents that all priority bike paths must be raised or have a road hump in front of them to ensure cyclist safety. Simple line markage and signage is not considered adequate to ensure drivers would stop and give way to cyclists. In response to inquiry about why pedestrian crossings at these busy intersections weren't raised, council officers said that they would require significant modifications and it wasn't feasible within council's budget. A quick review of any traffic studies documents indicate that raised crossings immediately in front of a roundabout, or on a roundabout or in front of a roundabout would provide a good level of service and safety for pedestrians, particularly vulnerable community users. And one other safety measure, which is interesting, I've begun to notice it in other councils, and that's the installation of what I now know to be called tactile ground surface indicators. These are installed for vision impaired people and are raised dots located on footpath, which are warning indicators to indicate nearby hazards. What is interesting is that they have not been included as part of the LMP3 rollout measures. So, for example, the existing zebra crossings, there's been no tactile indicators on the footpaths leading into the pedestrian crossing. Importantly, They've not
I'll
been
ask you
located.
to wrap up shortly, Diana.
Yep.
Thank you.
They've not been located at the priority crossing for the bike path or the Capital City Trail, which is where pedestrians lose right of way. All they get is a small printed sign on the ground, which is no help for people who cannot read these signs. So my question is, why is Council not prioritising pedestrian safety? When installing new traffic measures as part of the LMP3, this would be a perfect opportunity for Council to install optimal safety measures for pedestrians, particularly vulnerable members of the community. Why haven't they done this? And also, why are they not installing the tactile ground surface indicators for the vision impaired?
Thank you, Diana. I am going to pass all those questions on to Chris Levers, who can answer in detail the location-specific questions and the things that we are undertaking currently. Thank you, Mr. Levers.
Thanks, Mayor, for the question. The intro might have just slightly overdone the response I'm going to be able to provide tonight. I haven't seen any of those questions prior to the meeting, so I'm afraid with a detailed question like that, I can't provide a detailed response tonight. I would just make a couple of comments, though, to try and be helpful. I would need some of the technical experts to give me advice on some of those things, but I am aware, for example, that the zebra crossings are proposed to be at grade, and that's for a number of reasons. Raised crossings are great, but they're not suitable for every location, and there are concerns with infrastructure and drainage and other things at times. There's also a cost. For one raised crossing, we can deliver 7 at-grade crossings, so we have to consider whether or not an at-grade is suitable, and in this case, the experts have determined that an at-grade crossing is appropriate for that location. So the other thing I'd say is LAPM 3 went through a very extensive public consultation process and was ultimately adopted by the council with a plan for the treatments to be implemented. So officers are effectively implementing the plan that council adopted. So look, I know that doesn't provide detailed responses to every element of the questions. I think, we can either, if Ms Courtney can submit the question in writing, or we can take a transcript and try and provide responses. I am aware that there's been a fair amount of correspondence between the submitter and officers, but if those things are submitted, we can provide a bit more of a detailed response.
Thank you, Mr. Levers. And thank you to all the people who asked questions tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you at our meetings. We'll now move on to item number 8, which is council business reports. And we have planning controls over external paint colours coming up first. We have Bruce Phillips here to make a short presentation if councillors would like that. Yes, thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors. As you know, councillors, council resolved in 18th of May and asked the question in response to some particular matters in Gertrude Street, but asked a broad question, which was ways to strengthen the planning controls over the external paint colours of buildings situated in areas of heritage significance. So what the report does, Chair, is to outline in a transparent way how a planning scheme is changed for the benefit of people asking some of the questions and the broader community. As councillors know, but the report traces, there is a statutory process for changing the planning scheme, and effectively strategic justification is required to do that. There's practice notes around that, and councillors are generally familiar with that with recent planning scheme proposed changes. So the report does note that there are many heritage overlays in the city. There's some 500 odd heritage overlays. So the report outlines the response to the question that was asked by councillors, and also the report does note that design development overlay provisions are being worked through, and councillors are generally very familiar with that. In relation to Gertrude Street, there was a heritage review in 2019 as part of some of the design development overlay provisions. I won't go into specifics, but that did not recommend external paint controls for that particular area. So the report before you, Mayor and Councillors, it's not making a judgment on Gertrude Street in particular. I'm not casting a judgment on that, but it's responding to the question about how a planning scheme is changed and what Council could do. So the options before Council is that it could seek to have external paint controls in some part of the municipality, whether that's Gertrude Street or elsewhere. The question of Council was rather general, even though it came out of a more specific complaint. And that would require a planning process. There would need to be some studies to justify that, and it's certainly possible, but it would take time and resources. And at this stage, it's not on the work program with a number of design development overlays and other aspects that councillors are familiar with. So I'm happy to take questions, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Any questions for Mr. Phillips at this stage? Councillor Stone?
Thank you. It's a question of clarity about the report. On paragraph 15, it tells us that there are many heritage overlays with paint controls already in Yarra, 258 out of 532. That paragraph 16 then says each of the other 532 buildings would need to be individually assessed. Is that correct, or should that be the 274 remaining buildings?
I think it probably should be the remaining buildings, councillors. So again, just to add, councillors, that if councillors were keen to have external paint controls in a particular area, that would, as I said, that would require a study. So there's a number of heritage overlays that don't have that. So again, it's council's prerogative if they wish to seek that and which area, because we couldn't do it all at once, and there would be significant investigations and resources anyway.
And just a follow-up question, if I may, every time all of those 200 and whatever paint controls that exist all had a study behind them and a planning scheme amendment, is that correct? They all went through the same process?
Well, that's correct, councillors. There is, as you know, a statutory process, and we can't even put anything, a proposal on exhibition without what's called this authorisation from the Minister for Planning, and you won't get authorisation unless there's some strategic justification for that. And I'm not professing to suggest here that there is or there isn't strategic justification, but there is that statutory process. There is a high bar to get over to even get it on exhibition. And to answer your question, Councillor Stone, those other ones would have been subject to that due process, statutory process, and indeed a panel hearing, and you know, quite that extensive due process, due diligence.
Thank you.
I think you're on mute, Mayor.
You're on mute.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, and thank you, Councillor Stone, for your question. We have one member of the public here to make a...
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
Sorry, just before the submitter, just through you to any of the officers or councillors who are on the Heritage Advisory Committee, has this matter of external paint controls been discussed at the Heritage Advisory Committee? If so, what view do they have on this matter? That's my question.
Madam Mayor, from an officer perspective, I can't answer that without taking that on notice.
That's okay. I'll direct it towards Councillor O'Brien or Councillor Crosland. Councillor O'Brien?
Yeah, thank you. I had my hand up to just make the very point that this is something that has been under discussion through the Heritage Advisory Committee at the moment. And I think there is great discussion around the Gertrude Street issue. Those discussions are still ongoing, and a position has not yet been formulated, but the Heritage Advisory Committee will be bringing back something in the very near future via a delegate's report to Council.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Any more questions from councillors? No, we'll then hear from Philip Campbell, who's here to make a submission from a member of the public to this particular item. Mr. Campbell. If you could just turn your microphone on.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair.
through you, Mayor as Chair. Firstly, let's go back to the question. The question was, investigate ways to strengthen planning controls. Mr. Phillips himself just said what we've given you is a lesson in how you go about giving a change. It didn't say, here are the ways to do it. We've just had a lesson from the planning department in what's required, or what they say is required to organise a change. It doesn't say, here's the recipe for it. So I'd respectfully suggest that they've ignored the question. The question you guys asked was, tell us ways to achieve a result. And that hasn't been the answer you've gotten. You've gotten the usual obfuscation that you get from your planning department that gives you lots of pages of information but doesn't tell you how to do it. So I'll come to what I think you should do as a result of that. The fact of the matter is that there are numbers of councils and numbers of areas in Victoria that already have paint controls. And in a paper which I circulated yesterday, I've given 3 examples of that. One is the city of Port Phillip, the other one's the city of Melbourne, and the other one's Mount Alexander Shire. And if you discuss it with them, it was very simple. They took what were heritage overlays buildings and they applied paint controls to them. They didn't need to investigate it. If it's already got a heritage overlay, very simple. You say, here is the paint control for all of those buildings that have a heritage overlay. And what's the simple way to do it? You don't need to investigate painting. You don't need to get an approval for a particular paint scheme for every building that you want to do. You pick up what is the National Trust scheme, which gives you a palette of colours, and you can choose anything you like out of that palette of colours. Now that could, I guess, if you really stretched it, you could paint a building such as the one in Gertrude Street with every one of the colours out of the National Trust palette, if you so chose, and you may be able to get a very weird effect as a result. But, you know, at least then it's very simple. Here's a palette of colours. If you've got a heritage overlays, these apply. The minister I've spoken to, it was very simple. He's happy to help. He agrees with the proposition. It's not a big deal. So why do we have to go, you know, all this about we've got to assess every building, we've got to it's not true. You don't need to do that. So I would suggest you go back to the planning department and say, please answer the question. The question was, give us a simple way in which we can impose painting controls. Don't give us a 3-page lesson on what are the problems. Give us a solution. So I'd ask you people to reject this report, send it back to the planning and say, please come back with a simple 3 or 4-step solution to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip, for your submission. Councillors, are there any further questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question.
Councillor Jolly, then Councillor Landers.
Sorry, I was on mute. Mayor, mine is more a suggested way forward, not by way of motion, but just sort of somewhere in between nothing and that. So it might be better to take it after the question. If
that sounds like
okay with you.
I'll leave it till after Councillor Landers' question.
Yeah, I'd like to just ask a question to Mr. Campbell, if I could. You used the word impose. What about the actual owners of the property in some of these areas who may not agree with you? What do you say to their rights to sort of contribute to this conversation?
Well, I'd go and ask the City of Melbourne, the City of Port Phillip and Mount Alexander Shire to start with. How did they do it simply? I mean, seriously, do we want buildings looking like that all over our shire, all over our council area? Seriously? And if you let this one stand, that means anyone can do this sort of thing. Is that what we want in a world close to the World Heritage Area, for goodness sake? Or the other side of the street? Is that what you want to see? Come on. So I think it's very simple. If you've got a heritage overlay building, here is the paint controls for it. Go and ask how they did it in the other areas. It's not that difficult. And as I said, if you really wanted to be bizarre, you could choose, if you choose the National Trust palette, which already exists, you don't need to discuss it much further. Yes, you could, if you were this hotel, probably choose every one colour out of that palette and make a bizarre building out of it. But
Thank you, Philip.
Come
I think we'll refrain from going over ground that we've covered already. Councillors, if there are no other questions, I'll throw back to Mr. Councillor Jolly, Councillor Stone.
Yes, sorry, it was a question for Mr. Campbell too. This motion came out of the painting of that hotel in Gertrude Street, and that's the picture you've just held up. Mr. Phillips wrote to them after that meeting and asked them to consider and I believe that the huge zigzag has gone. Is that correct on the corner? It's still there.
That came after Mr. Phillips wrote to them as a result of Mr. Phillips's letter.
Okay. So are there any other, I'm just trying to get a handle on how big a problem this is or whether it's just confined to that building.
Well, it's confined to that building at this point, but if you let that go, what's to stop everybody else in the street doing exactly the same thing? They'll all say there's a precedent. You let that happen. Next thing it'll be all up and down Gertrude Street and around the rest of the city. It's just not, you know. And I'm sorry, Mr. Phillips, but Mr. Phillips did kindly write to them, but that was the result. They went out there and purposely did that as a result of it.
I'll now seek a way forward, and Councillor Jolly has foreshadowed that he would like to.
Thank you, Mary. It's just a suggestion. It's obviously a controversial issue, and there's different views on it. But insofar as we've got a Heritage Advisory Committee that we take very seriously, it's one of our more active advisory committees. It hasn't yet discussed this matter. Would it not be germane to defer a decision on tonight's report until after HAC has an opportunity to discuss the question and we hear back from them? Because I'd be mad keen to hear what Councillor Crossland, O'Brien and the community members on that committee have to say. It's obviously not going to make any difference to anything if we just leave it a month or a fortnight. So I was just, through you, Mayor, I was suggesting that I guess it's a sort of a question to Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Crossland. Is it possible for you guys to discuss this at your next meeting, and just to see if there's support for that as a suggested way forward? I think they would be really angry if we were to make a decision one way or another on this tonight when they haven't had a chance to talk about it. As an ex-member of FAC, I think they would think that.
We have discussed it, but we haven't come to a conclusion yet because it's such a complicated issue. So that's where we're at. So that's why a report hasn't come back to council on this specific item. So I would agree with Councillor Jolly.
Councillor Crossland?
Sorry, I didn't have my hand up.
No, that's okay. Sorry, I just wanted to give you the opportunity if you had something else to add in response as the other delegate on the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor O'Brien did touch on, we have discussed it at HAC. We didn't come to a conclusion on what a position is, but at the same time, it is completely appreciated that this is a matter that it's not super straightforward in terms of you can't just apply paint controls, but I'm happy to discuss that outside of this setting right now, noting that we're talking about a matter that's being put forward in front of us right now.
Thank you, Councillor Crossland. Do you have a proposal that you'd like to put forward, Councillor Jolly? Or
sorry to I think Councillor Landis has had his hand up, and maybe I'd like to hear what he has to say before I make a suggested way forward.
Okay. Councillor Landis?
Yeah, I'd like to concur with Councillor Jolly. I'd like to bring it up at the Business Advisory Group. We've sort of talked about bringing this up and hearing what they also have to say. 25% of ratepayers are from the business community, and I'm sure they'd like to be involved in this conversation as well, and it'd be interesting to hear their comments as part of this debate. So I concur with Councillor Jolly's view to probably sort of tease this idea out a little bit more with some of our advisory groups.
Could I just note, as part of the debate, that this has been in the agenda for the usual advertised period of time, and that apart from Philip Campbell here tonight, no members of those advisory groups have contributed to the conversation, and that really is the kind of usual process for encouraging public and other submissions. Just to kind of note that observation. Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Mayor. It was a discussion. There were conversations held by HAC members today and yesterday and on Friday regarding this matter, and people considered speaking at the meeting, and it should also be noted that our heritage advisor was not consulted on this matter either, so I think it should be deferred.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mayor. It sounds like people are speaking for and against a motion, and I'm not clear is this still questions or what's...
Thank you, Councillor Stone. You're absolutely correct. I have made a mistake there in the order of the process. So I'll seek a way forward now. Councillor Jolly?
I'd like to propose a way forward, Mayor, which is that this matter be deferred for 1 month to give the Business Advisory Group, the Heritage Advisory Group, and any other members of the public an opportunity. If there's a seconder to that, I'll speak to it.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Landers, thank you. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Jolly?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, you're quite correct, Mary, in your comments that this is advertised in the normal process. The officers have operated in the normal way, and there's nothing that they've done wrong by way of the timing or that they haven't tried to do anything, shifty or anything like that. That you're quite correct to in your comments there. But the fact of the matter is, we know from Councillor Landers that the Business Advisory Group haven't discussed it. We know that in the last day or so, this has gone in some of the resident Facebook pages, and I've got to say, as somebody who doesn't like that building, I'm in a tiny minority. The vast majority of people who've commented online have said this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. They love the look of that pub, but that's not what I want to litigate right now. I think that there's different views on that. This is more about the process of how we protect or not protect the external paint on heritage buildings, which I think, speaking for myself, is very, very important responsibility for a municipality that has such a high percentage of heritage buildings in its geographical area. And I think that there's no reason that we have to rush through a decision tonight. And just by doing it, deferring it for 2 meetings, I think we'll get a better result. It'll probably be, if I had to be a bet, a support for the council officer recommendation, but at least we can say that decision has been made through full consultation, or better or more consultation than it has been if we make the decision this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jolly. Councillor Landers?
Yeah, helps. Yes, I concur on those words. And just to add that I think it's really important that we have inclusiveness in our decision making, and that all the various groups or stakeholder groups are able to participate in the decision making process. I think that's important. So I would concur with Councillor Jolly's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Landers. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Wade?
Yeah, I think the officer report is really clear, and we've got, it just sounds like it's horrendously expensive, and I think they've been really clear in setting that out. So I'd prefer to decide this tonight, and if Heritage Advisory Committee has really strong views on it, then they can come back later and tell them to us, and I don't see anything stopping them from doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Would anyone else like to speak for the motion? In that case, I will put it to the vote.
Can I get a right reply?
Certainly.
Yeah, just quickly, just on Councillor Wade's point, the cost of the process is under contention, but either way, it will make absolutely no difference to the cost of the process, whether it's super expensive or not, to make the decision tonight or in 4 weeks' time. It's not going to add any extra dollars to it whatsoever, and on that basis, that discussion can be had when we have the substantive debate. It's not going to increase the cost if we defer it by 2 meetings. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jolly. I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you.
Councillor Landers, is cameras off?
Councillor Landers? Oh, thank you. So I'll ask that again. All those in favour? Councillor Jolly, Deputy Mayor Councillor Nguyen, Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Stone and Councillor Landers. That's carried. Thank you. We now move on to the next. Sorry, just to check with Ms. Niku, is there any clarification as to the deferral time on that?
What we have, Mayor, is going off Councillor Jolly's mention of 2 meeting cycles. We don't have a meeting in a month, which was his original language, but we've got the next meeting is on the 7th of September. The one after that's the 5th of October. Based on, I think what we heard is we'd be listing this for the 5th of October.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. We come now to item 8.3, plaques, statues and monuments in public places within Yarra. And we have Brona King.
Mayor, you've got 8.2, Yarra Ngana plan.
Thank you, Ms. Vaidinath. 8.2 is the Yarra Ngana Plan 2020 to 2023, the Year 1 Action Plan report and the Year 2 Action Plan adoption. And we have Colin Hunter here tonight to give us a report. Councillors, would you like to hear from Uncle Colin Hunter tonight? Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight and thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight and introduce myself. People who don't know me, I'm Uncle Colin Hunter, who's been managing the Aboriginal Partnerships Policy, now known as the Yarra Ngana Policy, at Council for the last 13 years, and I'm a director at the Wurundjeri Council and also an elder and traditional owner of Melbourne and the area known as Yarra. Before I start, I just want to acknowledge country. And I'd like to acknowledge that the City of Yarra acknowledges the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners and true sovereigns of the land known as Yarra. We acknowledge their creative spirit, Bunjil, their ancestors and their elders. We acknowledge the strength and resilience of the Wurundjeri Wurrung, who have never ceded sovereignty and retained their strong connections to family, clan and country, despite the impacts of European invasion. We also acknowledge the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to life in Yarra. We pay our respects to elders from all nations here today and to elders past, present and future. And I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to everyone sitting around the Zoom table tonight and acknowledge the non-Aboriginal people that are here tonight, the councillors, the mayor, the CEO and all the public. My reason for being here tonight was the purpose is to provide Council with a report on the implementation of the Yarra Ngana 2020-2023 Year 1 Action Plan 2020. I'd like you to refer to attachment 1, which gives you a detailed report on all actions contained in that year plan, and then to present the Yarra Ngana Second Year Action Plan for Council's adoption. But on top of that, I want to acknowledge and thank all the Wurundjeri Wurrung, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the community, who have contributed and continue to contribute their time, energy and knowledge to the Yarra Ngana Plan 2020-2023 and the delivery and associated projects. I'll open that up to councillors if there's any questions I'd like. I give the briefing last night. If there's any, if anyone's read any more today and wants to ask me any few questions, I'm quite happy to take them on.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions tonight for Uncle Colin Hunter? Thank you. Councillor Wade.
It's a bit of a Dorothy Dixer, but Colin, I know you mentioned last night that despite COVID, you were able to roll out a really impressive program of events last year. And so I just thought I'd give you the chance to talk about how you transitioned online over the last 12 months.
Oh, wow. That was, we've only got 10 minutes, but that was a real educational lesson for me, because I hadn't seen a computer before I started at Yarra 13 years. I'm a tradesman. Right, so, look, we're with the support of many, many people within my team. We're only a small team of 3. Across council, many branches of council have had the support. We transitioned our network meetings because we've got a mountain of network meetings that we contribute to and consult with the community. To take them online, wow, getting people around the table. We could, it was just amazing. But then to transition onto, things like the National Sorry Day event, we had 7,000 to 8,000 people in the first 24 hours access that. So, you know, we need to consider in the future that it's online as well as in person, no matter what COVID rules change. And then to things like Smith Street Dreaming, you know, it was in its 7th year. This would have been its 8th year. Last year, to throw that into a radio show on 3CR, a retrospective of Smith Street Dreaming over the last past 8 years, you know, it just contributed to the materials we've got to add to our cultural awareness training we've got. So, yeah, for me personally, it was a bit of a challenge, but now that I've adapted to it, you know, it's I think it's enhanced our work.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Stone.
Yeah,
Thank
Amanda.
you. Yes.
Councillor, yeah, sorry, I shouldn't say Amanda, but Councillor Stone.
There's an action in there about developing teaching resources for the early years, and I know we've won awards for other educational resources. Can you just speak to what that would include? Is it about the history of the Wurundjeri or Yarra?
Look, yeah. Can I just touch on what we already have with our teachers resource that I must say Daniel was very influential in bringing together. We brought it together many years ago, and it needs to get into that curriculum. You know, we're taking it to the Principals Network. They all love it, and it's really time with treaty discussion to get that localised Aboriginal history into the thing. But look, I've been, you know, Family and Child Services through, I don't like to mention names, but through Robbie Nugent down there and that team down there, they've been doing some enormous work, and through, not so much for Uncle Bill, but through young Rebecca, and like Rebecca's a teacher, training to be a teacher and herself, a young Wurundjeri girl here, and some of the stuff they're putting together, I think it's going to be really localised, and it's going to be, what would you say, give the context to country. Yeah, so I think that's going well, and I think it's a working process. As I said to Councillor Nugent last night, you know, a lot of our issues are generational, and it's, you know, one fight at a time, and we're getting there. And I think, you know, we are getting there. You know, we need more resource in my team. That's you know, and VJ and the executive have been working on that with the inclusion of the new heritage officer coming in and the position description for that. And I'm working with Richard in heritage now, because I was just listening to the previous conversation. Yeah. I hope that, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
That's great. Thanks very much.
But, yeah,
just
you always keep me on my toes.
I like to do that. And just a couple more questions. There's 3 actions in there that I think might be already completed. 1.1.2 induction for new councillors, 1.1.3 getting community input on the public drinking law, and 1.43 providing support to Charcoal Land, which sadly is closing.
Yeah, look, I'll take them on one at a time if I could, Councillor. And the first one was, just go again, sorry, because I took them all.
Well, I'm just saying.
The induction on the new councillors. Look, that's a work in progress. We done the stuff with AJ Williams, and the council executive done that. We're working with our old team at the moment, and Paul Nebo to put. And Kiwis, we're putting something more extensive together that we want to take out across the organisation. So I don't say that's ever a finished action, Councillor Stone. It's something we need to continue. Second one was?
Gathering community input on the review of the public drinking law.
Oh, God, we just come into a meeting today, and I was just talking to Inspector Jim Lappin, who's a Barkindji man who we lost to Dandenong, actually, which was a real shame. But you know, we had a meeting today, and if I could say that the people around the table are starting to get together here on this, and we've got a real chance in Yarra to showcase a model that the state can be proud of. And I think, you know, getting Victorian Aboriginal Health Service on board is very important in this. And that brings me into the third question about the sad news on Charcoal Lane, and the health service wanting to come back into that space, you know, around drug and alcohol. I think there's the opportunity we grab to build this health and wellbeing model to showcase to the Premier and the rest of the state that we know what we're doing in Yarra. And as I said to the department today, with no disrespect meant, for 230 years, the government's been telling us what's best for Aboriginal people. Now, we've been for a really extensive consultation period here, and I think it's time for, with this health and wellbeing approach, to let the community take charge of self-determination here and make a model that we can all be proud of. And I think Yarra's got a real chance here, and the people around the table are coming together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? No. There are no public submissions for this particular item, so I will seek a way forward.
I'd ask, Madam.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was just going to ask, Madam Mayor, that the councillors, get their head around that report that I've given on there, all them actions, look at what we've got going forward and adopt that second-year action plan. Let us, we're 8 months into that. There's been other things that have caused this issue, so let's just keep moving forward. I think I've had the trust of the councillors on this, to move forward, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So I seek a way forward. Do councillors have a thank you? Councillor Stone, Councillor Crosland, you're seconding?
Councillor O'Brien had her hand up a little while ago too.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, was that for a question or was that to
find a way forward
to move the motion?
One or the other, move or second.
Okay. Councillor Crosland, I did name you as seconding, but are you happy? I omitted Councillor O'Brien. Are you happy to relinquish that? Thank you. So Councillor Stone move and Councillor O'Brien second. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Stone?
Yes, I'd like to thank Colin for another very comprehensive report on the Year 1 action plan. I think no one could be in any doubt about the amount of work that's been done in the Aboriginal Partnerships team under difficult circumstances, as Councillor Wade highlighted, and also acknowledge and endorse the Year 2 action plan, which is building on the work of Year 1 largely, but there are some good new actions in there. I'm particularly delighted to see the embracing of the Yarra Nature Strategy, the employment of some young folk from the Narrett Ranges and getting them engaged, the focus on increasing Aboriginal employment and also on the educational materials. So it looks like another good year ahead. Sure, probably equally difficult circumstances, but the team is up to the job, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Councillor O'Brien?
Yes, I just really wanted to commend the work of Uncle Colin, Kiwa and the Aboriginal Partnerships team and the whole Yarra Nagana advisory committee. Their advice is invaluable, I think, to council. And I've got to say I'm immensely impressed with the work that's happened in terms of the 1 year action plan, the issues around COVID and also the whole Black Lives Matter movement. I think in terms of stopping Aboriginal deaths in custody, that has been an incredibly important piece of work, and we're very grateful to you, Colin, and your team for all that work and the broader community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Well, in that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. And thank you kindly, Uncle Colin, for joining us tonight.
Could I just have the final say and thanking everyone for their support, but I want councillors to know that it's just not our team. This is an organisational policy that reaches right across the organisation, and there's many people that make it happen. So I just wanted to make note of that and acknowledge the good work of many others. I'm going to hang around and listen to the Clark's report because it's reference to me, but I won't say no more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as just foreshadowed, we now come to an item entitled Plaques, Statues and Monuments in Public Places within Yarra. It's item 8.3 and we have Verona Keenan, the Arts and Culture team, to present if councillors would like to hear a verbal report. I would like to hear a verbal report. So thank you, Ms. Keenan.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, and good evening. This plaque, statues, monuments in public places within Yarra report has come from the resolution on the 23rd of June 2020 to engage the community on a range of issues connected to the systemic racism and injustice of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. The purpose of this report is to present to Council a stocktake of plaques, statues and monuments and public places, including parks and buildings in Yarra, where these have been named to honour and celebrate individuals and their achievements. Increasingly, we're becoming aware of the specificity of these recognitions, how tied they are to the values of their times, and the opportunity to revisit these as the community's values change. There's an increased appreciation in the community that the mechanisms for the creation of these civic honours may have been limited by a particular worldview, or those who have had the capacity to present the case effectively or have access to funding to have them realised. The lens of the audit is to identify if these individuals may be associated with the oppression of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The Yarra stocktake identified 97 places, spaces and objects in the scope of this report. So this included 58 open spaces, parks, reserves, sports grounds, 20 buildings, 12 monuments, memorials and sculptures and 7 plaques. The detailed listing is attached to this report. So as a snapshot, it revealed that 31% were named after British and colonial public figures, 1 monument to Captain James Cook, who is now a contested figure in relation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, 3.1% formally recognising the multicultural heritage and the LGBTIQA plus community of Yarra, 11.3% formally recognising prominent women leaders and their contribution and achievements made in Yarra, compared to 88% of the male counterparts, and 2 buildings commemorating individual Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the Pastor Dog Nichols Church of Christ and George Wright Hostel. Yarra Council's Captain James Cook Monument at the Rose Street entrance to Edinburgh Gardens in North Fitzroy has been the subject of public debate. There are those who challenge the notion of Cook being celebrated and commemorated. The monument has been defaced multiple times, including in June 2020. The damage was reversible and the monument remains in situ. It's been difficult to I should say that this object is the most contentious in the stocktake to date. It's been difficult to obtain information about some of the people in the stocktake, and the personal values and historical actions of some of these public figures is difficult to fully assess. Officers have drawn on the expertise of Yarra's historical societies to help provide information, and we thank them for their support. Further information that comes to light will be included as opportunity allows for the next stage of this process. So the stocktake has found British colonial rule influenced the names of many places and spaces in Collingwood, Fitzroy, North Carlton and Richmond. Many of the councillors were builders, estate agents or landowners, tradesmen, publicans and successful businessmen, and they were heavily reflected in the representation of monuments, memorials, open spaces and buildings. In addition, many streets, which is outside the scope of this stocktake, were named after British and colonial public figures, including municipal councillors. There's little formal recognition of the contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, although 2 public artworks should be noted that celebrate its peoples, the Delcuck Spirits by Kelly Kumalatsis in Fitzroy and the Stolen Generations marker by Rico Rennie in Atherton Gardens. However, it should be noted that these are in honour of particular groups as opposed to individuals. Multiple departments across council were involved in bringing this listing together. It should be noted that though while we've endeavoured to capture as completely as possible the objects and places in the scope of this report, there will likely be items that have not been captured, and these can be added to the list as they are identified. The next stage of work will involve a review of the policies and processes that relate to the civic acknowledgement and honours to individuals, and a further report will be drafted to Council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Keenan. Councillors, any questions for Ms Keenan at this stage? No? We have one member of the public here to make a submission, Chris Goodman, who is here on behalf of the 3068 group. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you for this report and the opportunity. I read the list and a couple of things stood out for me. One was I was looking for the plaque for the Centenary Pool that was built in 1976. And it was a very significant achievement for the city of Collingwood to have a swimming pool. And it was by notable architects. And there's a plaque on a rock outside the Collingwood Leisure Centre. And I just thought, well, it should be on the list, not that it needs to be revised. I don't think those architects were particularly racist or homophobic or whatever. But you know, it's a fact. There are markers there. There's also 2 monuments to the victims of the Hoddle Street massacre, which are very subtle because they're trees, and they're not well known because basically there's no plaque. It's just 8 trees in 2 semicircles on either side of Hoddle Street, yeah, I think that we need to record that in case someone comes and, you know, some sort of arborist thinks that, you know, the trees need pruning or something and doesn't understand their significance. I think some of those things are missed because they're perhaps not the focus of this study, and as the officer said, they can be added to the list, and that's great. I do feel that Mayor's Park is a neglected space. It's treated as a negative space between roads, when in fact it's an 1865 grant by Queen Victoria. And no, perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's a bit later than that. But it's been there since the suburb was laid out, and we don't have a heritage study for it. And I've been banging on about that for many years, and this is another example of where a heritage study might come in useful. Personally, I don't see why Captain Cook needs to reside in Edinburgh Gardens, or in fact, his cottage. He never came to Victoria, and I think he's a great explorer and a great scientist, and those expeditions are something that can be celebrated for their scientific achievement. It's also crucial to the history of Australia, those first encounters. Cook didn't discover Australia, but he didn't colonise it either. That came later, and it all gets a bit mixed up in the history, and I can understand that. I'm not in favour of toppling monuments. I am in favour of, you know, revisiting history and adding new monuments that rebalance things. I think that's a good attitude, for what it's worth. Yeah, that's just. I'm not against the project at all. I just thought I'd add a few comments, and I certainly support it. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your submission tonight, Chris. Councillors, I will seek a way forward, and I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Can I have a seconder for that?
Questions?
Would you like to ask a question, Councillor Stone?
Yes, please. Just to the officer, to Ms. Keenan, this is an audit or a stock take. There's now a list. I guess there's an entity. What's the process for adding to that if we get examples like the Collingwood pool? Is it expected that it will be added to over time? Where will it be kept? Is it like the significant tree register? What's its status now?
Ms. Keenan?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yes, so that, the idea is that it is a living document and a living list. So prior to this this exercise, there wasn't anything that existed within council. The names were held in different registers across different areas, depending on the areas that different units managed. And so the proposal would be that this is a list which is a growing list. In terms of how it is held, and how that is situated within the organisation. I think that's something to be determined, but it may well relate to around asset management, where much of the information has been drawn from. So that would be something to be determined.
You're on mute, Mayor.
Thank you. I was wondering what that motion was coming from you, Councillor Stone, Councillor Wade, sorry. Councillor O'Brien, you have a further question?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, is there any possibility for something like the trees that were just mentioned as monuments to the Hoddle Street massacres victims? Is that something that could be put on this list?
Ms. Cannon?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. This list is it is very specific in terms of it is looking at individually named memorials or places, etc. So I'm not sure in terms of that memorial how it fits within the scope of this project. I guess that's something we can identify, and I'm not aware how it's listed within council. Otherwise, I would have to say as well. So,
thank you, Ms. Cannon. I note that Ms. Chan has something to add to that.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors, and thank you always to Mr. Goodman for his submission. So, we are aware of the memorial to the victims of the Hoddle Street massacre, and our understanding was at the time that was created that the families were quite clear that they didn't want a plaque placed, but they wanted trees for it to be a subtle monument. They didn't want it to become a place like others. So I think we are aware of it. We can certainly add it as an operational part to this register if that's what council prefers. I'm certainly aware that it is part of our open space management plan, so it is in our records, but if you like it to be part of this one, we can add it to this one. So I know that, just wanted to note that that's what the instructions, I guess, in the way it was created, that it was to be subtle.
Thank you, Ms. Chan. Any further questions? In that case, I'll return to the way forward. I'm happy to move, and I had Councillor Wade happy to second the motion. So I'll speak to the motion, to the officer recommendation now. Thank you to Ms. Keenan and to Ms. Chan for bringing this report to us. I welcome the opportunity to take stock of our plaques, monuments and public places. And in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement, taking stock of how history has been recorded and how it continues to be taught and perpetuated is an extremely important task for us to undertake. I note the unsurprising findings that there is a significant imbalance towards British and colonial figures, towards male figures, and towards those with money and power. And I also note that this is the first part of the process, that the recommendation is that council notes the report on the stock take, and that we also note that a future report will be tabled, which relates to the policies and processes in relation to the civic acknowledgement and honours to individuals. It remains open to council in the next phase of the process to review, to either rectify retrospectively things that have been done in the past, or to put into action actions and policies for the future. So in moving the officer's recommendation, I'd also like to recognise the incredible work of the arts and culture team in placing a significant emphasis on collecting and presenting and commissioning works from underrepresented artists and musicians, and most particularly from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists and musicians. And I think that while it's only related to this topic of plaques and monuments, it does go a significant way to visualising and foregrounding the significant contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to life in Yarra. So I think that's a really important part of the picture, and wanted to just take the opportunity to note that. So I urge councillors to support this report, and thank you for putting it together. Councillor Wade?
Yes, echoing everything the Mayor has said. It's, yeah, a really, really great piece of work. I'm really glad to be on a council that's done this, and I think thanks also go to Councillor Stone, who I believe put this up last year, and the previous councillor who supported commissioning this piece of work as well. Yeah, it's unsurprising but depressing to see the disparity in representation in these kind of figures. And again, echoing the Mayor's comments about the arts and culture team doing an incredible job. We've seen some really, really impressive pieces of public art commissioned by Indigenous artists even in the last 6 months, including on Rose Street and for the proposed Otter Street Park as well, that are really embedded in how we operate. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you recommend next. And thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? No, in that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Before we move on to the next item, I think I'll give everyone a break. Is 5 minutes sufficient? All right, so we'll see you back here at 8:30, at 8:42. Good evening and welcome back to the council meeting of 17th of August 2021. We are now at item number 9, which is notices of motion, and there have been none listed. And that brings us to petitions and joint letters. Councillors, are there any petitions or joint letters to table tonight? No. We come to questions without notice. I believe Councillor Jolly has a question. Thank you, Councillor Jolly.
Thank you, Mayor. Yesterday, all councillors at the City of Yarra, and I guess all councillors throughout all Victorian councils, received an email from the Australian Services Union, the ASU, who are the main union that organise the staff at Yarra Council. And the union is asking that all councils do 3 things. So, and they are that they commit to the Commonwealth Home Support Programme service until July 2023, and establishment of new support at home programme, become registered providers of home care packages, and finally to consult with the community in the first instance about any proposed changes as required now under Section 55 of the Local Government Act. So my question, Mayor, through you to the CEO, whoever officer wants to answer it, is to, if I could just get an initial opinion from senior management at council, senior officers at council as to what they think about this log of claims from the ASU. The ASU have organised a briefing for councillors which people can register for. I think it's an online one coming up. I've personally registered for it today. I'm keen to hear their arguments, but I'm also keen to hear what council management have to say. So that's my question, Mayor.
Just before I refer that question to Mr. Gosling, I would just like to note that there have been 3 extensive briefings, and I think that probably if Councillor Jolly would like to participate in those conversations with councillors and council staff, that it would be well advised to attend or to review those ones and to attend future ones as well, because it is a very complex and ongoing issue that I think we're all in the process of grappling with.
No, I take that, Mayor, but it's just, and this relates to the question from whatever officer wants to take it. This is a matter of great public concern because this has gone out to the community now, and people are keen to hear what we, at least as the organisation, have to say. And that's not going to be known if it's just kept within the briefing forum. So I take your point, but that's why I've asked the question tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jolly. Mr. Gosling, I'll throw the question to you. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors.
Your microphone is a little dim. If you could adjust it.
Sorry, can you hear me now, Mayor? Is that better?
That's better, thank you.
Sincere apologies for that. Thank you, Councillor Jolly, for the question. Yes, it's certainly a very important question and something that council is grappling with. Indeed, many councils throughout Victoria are grappling with. The Commonwealth Home Support Program, as many councillors would know, is due to be transitioned into what's called a consumer-directed care model. Now, we don't have the final date for that. There's certainly, and we understand that it's likely to be 2023. At this stage, council is contracted to offer that program until June 2022, although we do fully expect the program to be extended to 2023 at this stage. As the Mayor indicated, we are going through a series of briefings with councillors at the moment in relation to some of the complexities around this. Council currently has a partially contracted model with respect to this program. There's been some natural attrition of those staff across time, and council will need to make a decision really in the next sort of 6 to 12 months about the future of that program. Certainly, whatever decision is made by council, there will still need to be substantial lead-in time. Of course, we are working very, very closely with the ASU and indeed with our staff and, of course, the community in making sure that council and officers in the first instance and council has the best information possible to make the most informed decision. Certainly, we are aware that the union have put forward this log of claims with respect to the provision of home care packages. Of course, that is tied directly to what council decides to do with the program. As I may have said that some of this, unfortunately, is outside of council's control. That sector reform will occur, and council will need to make some decisions about what is the best way for us to support our community moving forward. In lieu of that, we have been having lots of conversations with a whole range of stakeholders, and particularly with staff and community. And just for those councillors that are unaware, this has included a range of client surveys. We've certainly had the Living Well surveys and working, and that's developed as part of our Active Ageing in Yarra strategy. And also we've had lots of staff engagement. There's been a number of briefings with the council, and we've also been working with the AAAC, the Active Ageing Advisory Committee. And councillors would also be aware that we also engaged with a deliberative panel. It's a couple of years old now, and where a number of these options were actually put to our consumers, and this was a representative panel. Now, of course, we still have lots more engagement to go, and we will be providing a lot more information to councillors in the coming months in order to make the most informed decision moving forward. And certainly very happy to provide any detailed information for any of this for individual councillors as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gosling. Any further questions without notice?
Can I just do a follow-up question? It's a very simple one. Mr. Gosling, could you give us any idea at this stage, and it's okay if you can't, as to when you think you'll be asking council for a decision on this matter?
It's difficult to say with great precision, Councillor Jolly, but I'd certainly be saying that we'd be wanting to try and get a decision really in front of council if by the latest by in the early part of next year, so probably February, March next year. We still have quite a bit of work to do in the first instance, such as reviewing the work of the previous deliberative panel. Now, the circumstances haven't particularly changed. There was a slight delay there because as officers we were waiting for the outcome of the Royal Commission into aged care, and we felt that perhaps that might give us a bit more of a steer in terms of what the Commonwealth was looking for. Now, that hasn't really it's eventuated in some recommendations, of course, focused mainly on residential aged care, but certainly in terms of the substantive question about transitioning to a consumer-directed care model, we felt that we should wait a little bit just to see whether or not there was going to be some recommendations out of that, because as councillors would be aware, some of the experience of the NDIS and that model led to some euphemistically some teething problems and certainly some issues, and so we want to make sure that the way forward is appropriate. So at this stage, as I said, at the earliest it would likely to be February or March next year, but just recognising that we don't want to go much longer than that, because we also want to make sure that whatever decision council makes, we have a substantial enough lead-in time to ensure a smooth transition, not only for staff but also for our customers and clients.
Thank you, Mr. Gosling. Any further questions without notice? Councillor Stone?
Thank you. I think this might be to the Director of Planning and Placemaking. It's about wood heaters. There's been yet another study recently that's had a lot of publicity about the adverse health impacts of wood heaters, and those of us who were on the Planning Decisions Committee last week were faced with another application with a new wood heater and a flue with objectors saying, do something about this, it's not healthy, and us saying, well, we can't. And we've been through this many times. So I'm referring to a motion that Council moved successfully last year on the 23rd of June, where we noted that the City of Darebin was making representations to the state government seeking regulatory action and monitoring on wood smoke pollution, and noting the various studies about the high incidence of respiratory disease in Yarra and representations by Yarra residents to discourage the use of open fires and wood heaters, and in particular that the Mayor write to the Premier asking how the state government plans to address the identified adverse health emissions, and that the motion be referred to our communications team for public communication around the health impacts of wood heaters. So my question is, was there a response to the letter from the Mayor to the Premier about what the state government was planning to do about wood heaters in the city? And secondly, has there been information and communication through Council's public media platforms raising awareness of the adverse health and environmental impacts of open fires and wood heaters, given that's really all we can do at the moment?
Thank you, Councillor Stone. I'll direct that towards you, Mr. Phillips. It was before my time as Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, councillors. To my knowledge, there's been no response from the Premier. I'll have my office chase that up just to reconfirm that to councillors, but I don't believe we did get a response. And in relation to the communications and education aspect, again, I'd have to refresh my memory on that, councillors, and I'm happy to do that this week and keep councillors informed. If that hasn't occurred, I'm sure there's some material we'll be able to find and put on the website and encourage and urge people. But as you say, Councillor Stone, unless it's in the planning scheme, and that would be potentially a difficult one to get in the planning scheme at the moment, then there is no control. It's only a matter of urging and encouraging. So I'll get back to councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. If there are no more questions without notice, I'll move on to item 13, general business, and we have at 13.1 a motion from Councillor O'Brien, solidarity with the Murugapan family, and I'll leave it to you to state the contents of the motion, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the community, I think Ms. Niku has the motion on the screen, but basically Nades Murugapan and Priya Nadasalingam are Sri Lankan Tamils who separately fled Sri Lanka and sought asylum in Australia. They were granted temporary protection visas. The couple met in Australia in 2014.
Sorry,
married.
Councillor O'Brien, can I just interrupt you? Sorry, if you could just state the substance of the motion rather than the background at this stage. When you speak to the motion, I'll give you the opportunity. You're welcome to speak to the background, but if you could just indicate what the content of the motion part is.
Oh, so this is a motion in solidarity of the Tamil family that have been were living in Australia or in Biloela, and they were then subsequently transferred to Christmas Island and are in detention. The daughter got very ill. It was a very terrible situation. The family came back to Western Australia. I think we're all familiar with this case. It's just a motion of solidarity for the family.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Do you have is there a seconder for this motion? Sorry, I can't actually see the screen, so I might ask
Councillor Wade.
Ms. Niku. Thank you, Ms. Wade. Councillor Wade, thank you very much. You're now welcome to speak to the motion, Councillor O'Brien.
Okay, so as I was saying, the couple originally came to Australia on temporary visas, seeking asylum. They had 2 children. They started their family life in Billawheeler, Queensland, where Nades worked within the community and volunteered at such places as the Society of St Vincent de Paul. In 2018, the family was taken into custody by the Australian Border Force and held in immigration detention in Melbourne. In 2019, they were transferred to Christmas Island following a failed bid to deport the younger daughter. In 2020, the federal government was ordered by the federal court to pay $206,000 in legal fees for the younger daughter following the failed deportation bid, with the court finding she was not afforded procedural fairness. In June 2021, the family was permitted to live in community detention in Perth following the younger daughter's treatment in a Perth hospital. On the 12th of August in 2021, the younger daughter's request for her visa case was to be heard by the High Court, and that was rejected. So now it's really in the hands of the Minister for Immigration to deal with this situation, given it's not going through the High Court. So the motion is basically that Yarra City Council reiterates its long-standing commitment as a refugee welcome zone. Council expresses solidarity with Nades and Priya Murugappan and their 2 daughters, and that the Mayor of Yarra write to the Honourable Alex Hawke, Minister for Immigration, Citizenship, Migrant Services and Multicultural Affairs, to call on him to immediately grant the family the necessary visas to allow them to get on with their lives and allow them to return to the community of Billawheeler, Queensland, who have so warmly embraced them and truly want them home.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Wade, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, just to say I'm sure we've all been following the story of Nades and Priya and their 2 young girls. It's a pretty potent, I think, example of a graphic government policy towards people who arrived by boat in 2012 and 2013, and I think is one that we can all understand completely about why a flat policy to not accept asylum applications and not allow people permanent residency or citizenship in Australia, despite them being actual refugees, is so demoralising and depressing and unpleasant. So, yeah, I'm happy to support this motion and I commend it to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? No, I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. We now have a second general business motion, which is in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic response. Councillor Crosland, would you like to state the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This motion has been jointly prepared between Councillor Landis and myself. It is in response to, it pertains to the ongoing pandemic response and associated support. It seeks to acknowledge the impacts of the pandemic on the community, confirms Council's commitment to work with business and other parties to facilitate good outcomes, and is adversarial in terms of writing to relevant ministers regarding acknowledgement of support to date, for opportunities for further support now and in future, and means of address for the pandemic in general.
Thank you, Councillor Crosland. Councillor, excuse me. Do I have a seconder for that motion? I assumed Councillor Landers. Thank you for seconding that. Councillor Crosland, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, got it. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor. The COVID-19 pandemic is continuing to have a significant impact on individuals, communities and businesses in Yarra. In recognition of the significant effects of the pandemic, Council has continued to provide support for the community, businesses and arts sector. In addition to the $7.46 million COVID support and recovery package, Council has provided significant food relief, outdoor dining support, parklet and footpath trading support, along with significant emergency management operations to support locked down and high-risk sites, including public housing. Council has already supported these much-needed operations through the provision of significant staffing support for health services to test, isolate and vaccinate members of Yarra's community, and will continue to do so into the future. Continue has also offered of the use of Council's facilities as a mass vaccination hub for health providers. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, many of Yarra's businesses, including those in the creative sector, have experienced significant financial hardship. Despite efforts by government at all levels, many in the business community continue to bear a significant burden, adding to the ongoing distress in the community. Yarra is home to a significant artistic and creative sector, and this sector has suffered disproportionately in terms of the effects from the lockdown, COVID restrictions, and a general lack of funding support for artists and creatives. The effect of the ongoing lockdowns, as the only practical means of controlling the virus, are likely to continue for some time until the large majority of the community is vaccinated. The Commonwealth Government only recently released its COVID-19 vaccination plan, entitled Operation COVID Shield. Despite these recent efforts, Australia's overall vaccination rate currently sits at approximately 38% for single dose and around 21% of the population who are fully immunised. Australia's performance in achieving high levels of vaccination is low compared to other comparable countries. Unfortunately, the Commonwealth's delay in producing a more timely plan has compounded the ongoing impacts of COVID-19, and greater efforts are required to ensure that the community receives the protection as quickly as possible and the support they need throughout that time. Furthermore, the level of vaccine hesitancy has been exacerbated by a lack of clear communication plan and leadership. I'm hoping in part that this will seek to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crosland. Councillor Landers?
Thank you. I'd like to commend this motion and thank Councillor Crosland on preparing this motion. It's an excellent motion. It's a difficult time, very difficult to contemplate what's happening on the high street. In terms, and I wanted to sort of talk about three examples. Miss Frankie in Cremorne is an exemplary trader and has dealt with their COVID responsibilities efficiently, but unfortunately they were caught up in as an unsuspecting hotspot, and they've had to sort of wear the stigmatisation and all the adverse effects of loss of business as a result of that, and it's come at a great cost to them. Anchovy is another business that's exemplary in Bridge Road. Does everything by the book, does everything correctly, trades from within the window, but again became victim to a COVID contact, and as a result of having to deep clean, had to throw away all of their stock and have had to close down for 3 days, and it comes at considerable expense. I heard in tears from another trader who's had to close a business, Every time there's a lockdown, she has to sort of close the business, and once the lockdown is finished, she then has to rebuild the business. We just assume that once lockdown's over, these businesses can just resume. Well, they don't. And she had to sort of rebuild. And as she was sort of rebuilding, along came another lockdown. And it got to the stage where she just gave up and it was too much. And in tears, she's given up her business. We hear of coffee shops that are now reduced to maybe the husband and the wife and possibly one of the parents working in the business from 5 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So the businesses are doing it really, really tough with these lockdowns, which just keep coming and coming and coming. And it's in that context that we're calling on the government now to make their assistance more available, but also to improve accessibility for the traders to get access to these funds as well. So I commend this motion to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landers. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? No, I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried unanimously. That brings us to the conclusion of our general business motions. We have no notifications of any urgent business, but we do have one confidential item. So I will we'll vote on the closure of that meeting and then bid you good night. So the recommendation is that the meeting be closed to members of the public in accordance with Section 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020 to allow the consideration of confidential information. I'm happy to move that. Can I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Crosland. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. And so we wish you all good night. Those of you watching from home and members of the public who have joined us tonight, thanks for watching and see you in 3 weeks' time.